de los seminarios de temas de frontera en sustentabilidad que la Coordinación Universitaria de Sustentabilidad, la COUS, ha estado organizando a lo largo de todo este año. Es un esfuerzo muy, muy importante, y creo que cerramos con un gran broche de oro, o sea, con la presencia del doctor Peter Dauvergne, que me parece que es uno de los pensadores más críticos, más originales, más serios en el tema de justicia ambiental, con argumentos muy fundados, que tiene una larga trayectoria, tiene una obra muy, muy importante en este gran campo. Peter es profesor e investigador de relaciones internacionales en la Universidad de British Columbia, en Canadá, en Vancouver. No. Estamos en confianza. Ay, perdón, yo no quería estar en el centro.
Gracias.
Perdón. Bueno, decía que Peter es profesor e investigador en relaciones internacionales de la Universidad de British Columbia. Es especialista en política ambiental global. Su investigación se ha enfocado en temas de movimientos sociales, consumo, tecnología y corporaciones, y se ha especializado en las consecuencias de la desigualdad social y la devastación ambiental en el sur global. Recientemente ha incorporado temas de política de inteligencia artificial, contaminación por plástico, minería industrial, conservación de los mares, cambio climático, seguridad alimentaria, biocombustibles y deforestación tropical. Ha publicado exitosamente libros que son una referencia obligada, como The Shadows of Consumption, Las sombras del consumo, El ambientalismo de los ricos, Protest Inc., Ecobusiness y vías para un mundo verde, y el último libro, que se llama ¿Destruirán las corporaciones nuestro planeta? Desde 2010 ha publicado además es articulista en importantes revistas como Global Environmental Change, The Journal of Peace and Studies, y el Journal of Environment and Development, entre muchas otras. En 2016, la International Studies Association le otorgó el reconocimiento de investigador distinguido en estudios ambientales. Y podríamos decir más, pero agradezco mucho a Peter su generosidad de estar con nosotros el día de hoy, y de haber aceptado estar los próximos 3 días en el Congreso sobre transformaciones ambientales urgentes, que organiza la Universidad Nacional junto con el Earth System Governance Project en la ciudad de Oaxaca. Pues muchas gracias a Peter, y de una vez les digo quiénes nos van a acompañar, que también son gentes pues muy importantes en el campo de sustentabilidad que trabaja la UNAM, que viene creciendo en los últimos años. Está por orden alfabético el doctor Alonso Aguilar Ibarra, a quien agradezco mucho estar aquí. Alonso es biólogo por la Facultad de Ciencias de la UNAM y tiene maestría en economía pesquera en la Universidad de Portsmouth y el doctorado en ciencias agronómicas en el Instituto Nacional Politécnico de Toulouse. Actualmente, Alonso es coordinador del posgrado en Ciencias de la Sostenibilidad y profesor e investigador nivel 2 del Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. Alonso es académico en el Instituto de Investigaciones Económicas de la universidad. Sus líneas de investigación son economía ambiental, economía ecológica, economía de los recursos naturales, economía y gestión ambiental y vinculación monetaria de servicios ecosistémicos, teoría de juegos y economía experimental aplicados a medio ambiente. Digamos, es además un gran mentor y un gran colega. Simone Buratti es maestro en Historia Contemporánea por la Universidad de Bolonia, en Italia. Es candidato a doctor en Ciencias de la Sustentabilidad en la UNAM, muy pronto doctor. Ha sido director ejecutivo de la Asociación Internacional para el Estudio de los Bienes Comunes y director ejecutivo del Seminario Universitario Sociedad, Medio Ambiente e Instituciones, y trabaja actualmente en temas de bienes comunes urbanos y sustentabilidad en México y en América Latina. Y finalmente la doctora Elena Lazos, que es una tradición en el tema, en la universidad y fuera de la universidad, como antropóloga, como pensadora social del medio ambiente, una colega muy querida. Elena estudió la licenciatura de Biología en la Facultad de Ciencias también, y es maestra en Antropología Social por la Escuela Nacional de Antropología, realizó el doctorado en Antropología y Socioeconomía del Desarrollo en la EHES, en París. Ha sido profesora investigadora a nivel 3 del SNI desde hace mucho tiempo y es académica de nuestro instituto, el Instituto de Investigaciones Sociales, desde el 92. Ha coordinado 23 proyectos de investigación sobre dinámicas socioambientales y territoriales alrededor de la agrobiodiversidad y la biodiversidad. Sus líneas de investigación son ecología política en torno a la conservación de la agrobiodiversidad y soberanía alimentaria, percepciones e impactos sobre maíz transgénico, género y desarrollo rural, vulnerabilidad ante el cambio climático y cultura, y poder en torno a la conservación de los recursos naturales. Entonces, muchas gracias también a Elena, Simone, Alonso por estar con nosotros en este conversatorio. Y creo que sin preámbulo doy la palabra a Peter para su presentación. Pues si quieres nos pasamos para allá para... So we leave you alone.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming to today's talk. I wanted to extend a special thank you to Leticia for inviting me and welcoming me to Mexico. It's a real honor and treat for me to have the opportunity to present my forthcoming book with MIT Press. As you can see, the title is Genius Squared, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Sustainability. It's also a real pleasure and honor for me to have the chance to have a conversation with everybody on this panel on my previous book, which was titled, Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet? And you may think, gosh, the two books are very, very different, and how are we going to tie this conversation together? But in fact, one of the things that happened when I finished Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet is I came to the realization that one of the most common solutions that we see the international community and especially business propose for our very big global environmental problems, everything from climate change to deforestation to marine pollution, is technology. And so I thought, I want to investigate technology, try and get a better sense of when it is helpful, when we can see technology as a pathway to sustainability, but also I wanted to get a sense of when technology actually can pose risks and can pose dangers. And so I see this book, Genius Squared, as very much a follow-up to the book, Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet? And what I'm trying to get at with this book is to ask big questions about, in particular, artificial intelligence. And I chose artificial intelligence for a variety of reasons. One, it was very personal. For me, I've had a long-standing interest in artificial intelligence. When I was a young, just starting out student at university, my dream was actually not to become a professor of international relations, but I was hoping to become a professional chess player. And I had that dream for a while until I started to play people from the former Soviet Union, and I realized that the Russians were just far too strong for somebody of my caliber. And so I pulled away from that and developed a long-standing interest in watching the rise of chess computers and the game of chess. And so I wanted to come back to that, partly because of this interest that I've had personally. But I also came to decide to focus on artificial intelligence because I came to the conclusion that this is going to be one of the most powerful and important technologies for the world over the next 20 to 50 years. And that in particular, that this technology, artificial intelligence, was going to have very profound implications for sustainability. And so I thought, Has anyone written a book like this? I looked around, nobody had. I could hardly find any journal articles looking at artificial intelligence and sustainability. There were companies that were working on this issue, and there were activist groups that were looking at this, conservation groups in particular, but very little scholarship. So I thought, I'm going to pursue this. I've been on a very steep learning curve over the past 2 years, but I hope you feel that I come up with at least some interesting insights, some interesting ideas about how artificial intelligence might impact upon sustainability. I'm going to divide today's talk into 5 parts, as you can see from the PowerPoint slide. I'm going to start with just a very quick overview of the big arguments in this book. Secondly, I'm going to talk about some of the political economy of artificial intelligence. What are the businesses that are behind this? What is the money and the politics that's driving this technology? Then I'm going to look at the prospects for sustainability, then some of the limits and dangers, and then conclusions. And my hope is we can have a conversation, that we'll have some questions on this topic. There's going to be people here who probably know a lot more about how to make artificial intelligence come to life than I do. I'd be very interested in feedback and comments. I also hope we can link this to our conversation very directly on Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet? Because I think this technology, as we're going to see, as I'm going to argue, is going to have a very, very big impact on how businesses function. Oops. Well, let me start with then the arguments in this book. The very first argument that kind of holds this together is that I see artificial intelligence as altering the politics of sustainability for both good and for bad. That we're going to see, and we already are seeing, lots of instances where artificial intelligence is actually advancing sustainability, but we also see lots and lots of instances where it is really presenting one of the biggest dangers ever to sustainability. And here I'm not talking about some super intelligence. I'm not talking about artificial intelligence as human level intelligence. Instead, I'm talking about artificial intelligence as mostly machine learning and intelligent automation, and the dramatic spread of the ability of machines to think and learn from big data over the past 5 to 10 years. And I see this technology as much more comparable to electricity than, let's say, comparable to an automobile or an airplane, in the sense that this technology is diffusing through all other technologies. And in many ways, it's supercharging technologies, and it's enhancing and creating new features of technologies, the same way electricity has done since the late 1800s. And so this argument is a little bit perhaps controversial. Some people are not as sure that this technology, artificial intelligence, is going to have this impact. But I've come genuinely to believe that, wow, this is really a dramatic technology, and that anybody interested in sustainability is going to have to understand this technology and understand the different ways that it plays out. I'd be interested in feedback on that. It's not everybody would agree with that, but I feel personally quite strongly that this technology has really dramatically is going to and is already dramatically changing the nature of sustainability. The second kind of overarching argument of the book is that to understand both the ways it's going to promote benefits and the ways it's going to create risks, we have to see this technology as part of the global political economy. We have to understand it as part of politics and as part of economics. And that may seem like an obvious argument to a lot of people, but the vast literature so far on artificial intelligence has really been done in the scientific community or in the computer science community. And frequently it tends to be very technical, and it tends to focus very much on how to make it work safer, or how to make it work better, or how to improve it. Or it is done by big research houses, companies like McKinsey or PricewaterhouseCoopers. And in those cases, they tend to explain it very much as an addition to and as a benefit to the economy. Flipping it, however, to look at it as part of the political economy and to think about how politics and economics is interacting with this technology, I think exposes a lot more of the risks and the dangers. And in particular, it helps us understand how this technology is interacting with big business and how specifically this technology is influencing that question of, will big business destroy our planet? Because I think, in fact, this technology is feeding very much into the power of big business. A third overarching argument of this book is that if you look around and you just kind of see the media reports and look at what the big consulting companies are writing, and you look at what people who are writing for the Davos meetings are writing, then it might look like artificial intelligence in all of its different forms is going to launch, quote, a sustainability revolution. In fact, in a speech a couple years ago, Al Gore, who those of you know is a very prominent environmental activist, very committed to advancing sustainability and particularly action for climate change, he talked about these new technologies of artificial intelligence, of the digital revolution, as a sustainability revolution, as a true opportunity. I agree with that in part. I think there's insights in that. But I think one of the real risks here is that declaring this only beneficial for sustainability overlooks what I see as a very dramatic set of threats that are coming from this technology. And so my fourth big argument is exactly that. There are many limits of this technology, and there are many, many dangers. And in fact, I would argue, and did argue in the book, that often the dangers that we're currently confronting with this technology outweigh some of the benefits. Not that we don't want to pursue those benefits, we do, but these dangers and risks have to be confronted, or we're going to have an even bigger sustainability crisis before long. So the final kind of argument of the book is that the lesson here is, although there's much promise from this technology, we need caution, caution, caution. So that's kind of what I'm going to argue in this presentation today, and kind of take you through how this works. So let me start with the political economy of artificial intelligence. As I said, we really need to understand the politics and economics of this technology to really understand its consequences. And the first thing to know, if you're not following what's been happening in the past decade or so, we're seeing a dramatic rise in the power of artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, or the ability of machines to learn from large amounts of data. One of the examples that really dramatically influenced me and made me think very differently about this technology was the dramatic breakthrough in the ability of chess computers over the past couple of years. In particular, one computer program called AlphaZero that a company in Great Britain called DeepMind, which was then later acquired by Google. And what this to give you a sense of how this technology works, what this chess engine did is, instead of learning from all the history of people like me playing the game and the hundreds of years of people studying and trying to understand openings and the middle game and the end game, what this computer did instead was it played tens of millions of chess games against itself. And all it was given was the rules of the game. It wasn't given any human knowledge about the game. And from that data of playing itself, it taught itself strategy, tactics, it taught itself the end games, it taught itself all of the openings. And at the end of this process, it played, at the time, one of the top chess engines in the world, and it completely destroyed it. It was far superior in every way. And when I played through these games, what I found kind of most remarkable about this is this new kind of computer that learned from just playing itself was actually much more creative, much more aggressive, much more imaginative, I would even say, than any previous chess engine that I'd ever seen. And I came to realize, wow, this new way of learning is actually quite a different way of trying to get machines to think, get machines to become smart. And then I started looking at, wow, what are the applications of this elsewhere out there? And besides other games like Go and Shogi, we of course now see this technology of machine learning, but also artificial intelligence more generally, in chatbots, translating for us languages, recommending products for us, recommending TV shows and movies for us. but very powerfully also identifying faces. Facial recognition is based upon this new artificial intelligence, trading stocks, issuing loans, diagnosing illnesses, even now starting to write novels. In fact, there was a breakthrough this year where we don't fully have this released, but some very dramatic advances in the ability of machines to actually craft literature, which is really quite remarkable when you think about it. And then there's many other forms of it in the robotic worlds: weeding fields, mopping floors for Walmart, of course, drones flying, and all of you will be very aware of the big competition right now for autonomous vehicles, right, for self-driving cars. And so we have quite a wide and dramatic dispersal of this technology. This gives you a sense of why I think of it as electricity. I could have named probably another 10,000 different applications of artificial intelligence now moving very quickly through different commercial products, moving very quickly through different parts of the political economy. Just to give you a sense of the value, PricewaterhouseCoopers estimates that roughly within 10 years, this is going to add $16 trillion US dollars to the world economy. And that's equivalent to the GDPs of, right, Brazil, India, the UK, Germany, and Japan. So this is a tremendous impact on the world economy, a really big dramatic infusion into how money is made and how we are actually trying to manage world affairs. So there's a couple of other features of this political economy of artificial intelligence that I think is really important for understanding both the benefits and the dangers of this technology. The first one is, I've just said all that. I've told you how extraordinarily powerful this technology is, but we also have to be extremely careful because there's a lot of hyperbole out there. There's a lot of exaggeration. And the reason for that is, well, a lot of these products and a lot of this technology is advancing through small startups and through companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple Computer, right? And they have a lot of interest in trying to make us think that they're at the cutting edge of technology. They want us to be confident in their companies being kind of pushing the boundaries of new technology. And the startup companies that are hoping to either be bought up by these big technology companies or hoping to become large companies themselves, they also have an incentive to say their product is quite extraordinary. It's doing quite a lot of amazing things. And so there are a lot of breakthroughs. There's been really tremendous advances, in particular in a machine learning technique called deep learning over the past couple of years. But still, we have to be very careful about, especially journalists and company reports, corporate social responsibility reports, on how they're explaining this. And so particularly, I've noticed a tendency in the corporate social responsibility reports of companies increasingly talking about this artificial intelligence as the future of fixing sustainability, that this is going to actually be coupled with corporate social responsibility and will get ourselves out of the sustainability crisis. At the same time, we get this exaggeration and hyperbole. There's also a lot of powerful interests that are concealing risks, that are actually hiding some features of artificial intelligence that, well, are either underexplored or not dug into in any kind of deep way. And so a lot of times we're getting new products out that people only see or only told the potential upsides of and not given kind of the potential risks and dangers. A third very important feature of the political economy of artificial intelligence is that the most powerful technology companies of the world are concentrating control over this technology. It takes a lot of expertise to develop artificial intelligence. It takes a lot of computing power. It takes a lot of financial resources to retain the top experts in the field of artificial intelligence. And so if you look at where the money is going and what companies are controlling these technologies, you see that the United States and China are very dominant in this sphere. And the big players are the ones that you see on the PowerPoint slide: Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Tencent, and Alibaba. But there's also many smaller companies in the United States and China, and there's many startup companies in the United States and China that are very actively engaged in this technology. Now, there are important breakthroughs and important companies in Canada, where I'm from, the same with the United Kingdom. They have a long history. Israel, France, Japan, South Korea. I'm not sure about the situation in Mexico. It'd be interesting if somebody has some expertise in that to give some feedback on that. But the kind of big takeaway here is that this technology, because of the extraordinary power of it and also the cost of it, that a lot of the power over this technology is concentrating into the US and China. And PricewaterhouseCoopers estimates that roughly 70% of the economic value from this artificial intelligence is just going to the United States and China. So this is further creating inequality in the global governance system between the richest and the poorest countries on the planet. But there are some powerful actors at play here. I didn't mention Russia. Russia is not a leader in terms of innovation and in terms of breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, not machine learning, but they are pushing on the military side. So you can see the well-known quote by President Vladimir Putin, right? Artificial intelligence is the future, not only of Russia, but of all of mankind. Whoever becomes a leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. And that was said just a couple of years ago, and since then Russia's been pushing hard, particularly in trying to move this technology into their military equipment and into their security apparatus, into their ability to control, infiltrate, and manipulate the internet, right? It's a very powerful technology of automation, and it gives new powerful insights into ways to control the internet, disseminate propaganda, and move disinformation through the internet. So you can see the potential power that comes from this technology. So that gives you a sense of the political economy of artificial intelligence and why I see this as actually an important lens in which to look at this if we're thinking about sustainability. And now let's turn to look at the prospects for sustainability. And one of the intriguing things about artificial intelligence is you can see lots of dark sides to it, but there's actually also lots of exciting things going on around sustainability, things that kind of have captured my imagination, made me feel genuinely excited that, wow, things are really starting to happen in areas that I've been long researching and hoping that we can see breakthroughs. Just to give you a couple examples, in terms of trying to advance knowledge and conservation, machine learning from big data, so taking large data sets and trying to understand, particularly make predictions, try and model things and look into the future. This has become very powerful for biodiversity mapping, for climate modeling, for especially discovering correlations in big data sets. And its predictive power is significantly higher than anything we've seen before. And so this is really important when you're trying to look 30, 50 years into the future, let's say if you're doing climate modeling or you're doing oceans management and oceans warming. And so a lot of scholars, a lot of scientists have been finding this to be very, very effective. It's been very powerful in terms of trying to help us track and understand things like illegal fishing. We have new platforms, example being the Global Fishing Watch that has an underlying AI-powered system under it that's helping us try and have a better sense of where fishing boats are fishing, what kind of illegal catch might be occurring. And then, of course, as is well known, we also have lots of increasingly sophisticated drones that are watching poachers, that are tracking them at night with surveillance cameras, trying to combat illegal logging. A lot of my early research was on trying to fight illegal logging in the rainforests of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And so this has become a really interesting technology for trying to help combat that, basically to empower enforcement officers in that. But there's also just some very, very intriguing stories out there of what this technology is doing. I'll just give you one example. I lived in Australia for 8 years and grew to love the country and love the ecosystems. And the Great Barrier Reef is one of the most extraordinary ecosystems in the world. If you ever have a chance, do visit the Great Barrier Reef. But the Great Barrier Reef, as many of you will know, is under extraordinary threats from climate change. It's under extraordinary threats from even tourism, as some of the coral reefs are being damaged. But one of the things that maybe you are less familiar with, it's also very much under threat from crown of thorns starfish. Crown of thorns starfish are a predatory starfish that when they have major outbreaks, they actually eat and consume the coral. And they're natural to the ecosystems in small amounts. You would want a small number of crown of thorns starfish to be in the Great Barrier Reef ecosystem, because it allows for regeneration and more diversity of the ecosystem. But one of the things that's been happening in Australia is we're getting breakouts of these crown of thorns starfish, and this is occurring in part because of agricultural runoff that is flowing into the waters and feeding these outbreaks. And so these have become very destructive. Some scientists estimate as much as 40% of the damage to the Great Barrier Reefs have occurred from these starfish. So one of the attempts to try and combat these starfish has always been to have scuba divers go out and try and remove these starfish. And this is time consuming. It can be very dangerous. The currents can be very swift. You can only do it in certain times of the day. And really it's kind of a small band-aid on a very big problem. So one of the ideas of using artificial intelligence has been to try and create semi-autonomous submersibles that basically swim the Great Barrier Reef, and they hunt for these starfish. And there's one very famous one called the Ranger bot, which has been swimming the Great Barrier Reef, finding these starfish very effectively, identifying them with 99% accuracy, and then injecting them with biosalts and killing those starfish. And the idea is that if you can get large numbers of these autonomous, semi-autonomous submersibles to swim the Great Barrier Reef, we can effectively manage and control these starfish, and we wouldn't need to worry about having humans do it, right? And these submersibles can function any day, any time of the day, even in fairly rough currents. And so it gives a lot more options for conservation management than previous. What's also very intriguing to me about the story of the Ranger bot is they've just done a slight conversion of the Ranger bot and turned in a new semi-autonomous submersible called the larval bot. And the larval bot has the capacity to swim parts of the Great Barrier Reef and reseed coral, and try and in particular reseed it with coral that has managed to survive the recent warmings that have come over the last couple of years that have killed large amounts of the coral reef. And so we have both semi-autonomous submersibles that are trying to deal with the starfish, and semi-autonomous vehicles that are trying to reseed the coral reef. And so you think, wow, that's a good thing for sustainability. That's quite a significant kind of way of thinking through. Here's just another example that caught my imagination that I find quite interesting. Partly, again, I said I've had this long-standing desire to save the tropical rainforests of the world. Here is a very interesting artificial intelligence-powered device, which is made by a startup called Rainforest Connection. And what this device is using recycled cell phones that then are upgraded with artificial intelligence to become listening devices that are then being placed in the canopy in different rainforests around the world. There's some actually in South America, there's some now in Southeast Asia, there's some in the African tropical forest. And these listening devices listen for the sounds of illegal logging or illegal mining or illegal poaching. So the rumblings of trucks or the sounds of saws. It's become extraordinarily sophisticated. It can even hear a jaguar walking through the forest. Not because they can hear the jaguar, but they can hear the sounds of all the other creatures in the forest that are reacting to the jaguar moving through the forest. And after this device hears these suspicious sounds, it autonomously sends an alert to the rangers that they should go investigate the illegal logging. And for those of you who've tried to fight illegal logging know that these vast forests is a tremendously difficult practical problem to actually manage this. And so to have devices that are actually able to assist in that way, again, a really, I think, valuable contribution, a very interesting one, and particularly using recycled cell phones, you can see, right, this is a way to also use some of our waste from our electronic waste in a more creative and interesting way. I'll just give one last example that kind of caught my attention. It's my own university, the University of British Columbia, and here there's a group of professors who are working on developing a self-learning and self-driving robotic laboratory They've actually named this laboratory ADA. And what's very intriguing about this is this is actually proposing its own hypotheses. It's running its own experiments, and it's specifically trying to advance solar technology, right? So it's been given a mandate to try and push ahead some very important environmental science projects. But their idea is not to just stop with advancing solar technology. The idea is we could have self-driving laboratories all around the world, just the same way we have self-driving cars, and they can be 10 times more efficient than teams of scientists. Not that we want to put all the scientists out of work, but when we're in an emergency situation and we need to deal with issues like climate change, this becomes a very powerful tool and technology to move forward. So that gives you a sense of some of the, I think, very interesting and intriguing conservation possibilities of artificial intelligence. I could have given you hundreds of more different examples. There's also very intriguingly a prospect for sustainability within the corporate sphere. And in fact, a lot of corporations are now embracing artificial intelligence. They're using it in a variety of different ways to try and advance what I think about as eco-business, or the use of sustainability to try and gain more efficiencies in your supply chain, try and improve your waste management, try and advance your smart packaging, try and effectively produce more products using less material and energy inputs, right? And so one of the things that artificial intelligence has managed to do is make that even more efficient, advance that even further. I'll just give one example, just to give you a sense. Google, as I mentioned, ended up buying up DeepMind, that ended up making that chess program called AlphaZero, right? And DeepMind is one of the leaders in artificial intelligence. And Google has used the artificial intelligence breakthroughs of DeepMind to automate the cooling systems of its data centers. And it's managed to reduce the total amount of energy use from its cooling systems by 30% by automating it with artificial intelligence, by actually having the artificial intelligence decide when and to what extent to modify the cooling of its data centers. And you might think, well, that's not that significant, but it is actually, because Google is one of the biggest users of electricity in the world. Their data centers now are massive and use large amounts of electricity, and so being able to cut 30% off of their energy use for the cooling is significant. But they're also moving that same automation of decision making and looking for efficiencies through other parts. And I should say, it's not just Google. There's Walmart, Nestle, McDonald's, Coca-Cola. All the big companies are now very much into artificial intelligence. And in fact, McDonald's just became one of the first fast food companies in the world to start acquiring their own artificial intelligence startup companies, machine learning in particular, and acting more like a technology company itself as it tries to automate and find business advantages using artificial intelligence. I'll return to that in a little bit. There's many other prospects for sustainability. I'm not going to go into great detail. I don't have enough time to do that, and we can do some of this on the Q&A. But there's also big advances in smart products, in electricity grids, in homes. Just to give you one small example, one of the things that has always made it difficult to rely extensively on solar and wind technology has been the unpredictability of the energy sources and the extent to which your wind might be highly variable, or your sunshine might be highly variable. One of the things that artificial intelligence and having them manage those grids has allowed for is much greater predictability in terms of bringing in the energy supply, and it's allowed a lot more companies like Google, like Apple, like Facebook, like Amazon even, to increasingly turn to wind power and solar power as a primary source of their energy. And so again, you think, that's actually really good news for the environment, really good news for our ability to move to renewable power and to clean energy. There's also a big dramatic number of smart cities being put in place around the world that are using artificial intelligence to manage everything from traffic congestion to air pollution alerts for their citizens. China is the leader here. They have huge numbers of smart cities being put in place. And just to give you an idea of some of the value of this is you can automate your traffic light systems and try and move your traffic through more quickly. And one of the ways that this can actually reduce air pollution is you're just not having cars idle as much. One of the ways you reduce total amount of energy use is there's just not as much time spent in vehicles, and so it's not burning as much gasoline. And so they can actually measure that. It's not huge amounts usually, but there's percentages of advantages from that. And so this is diffusing through a whole bunch of different smart city technologies. Again, in the Q&A, I'm happy to talk more about that. Won't spend too much time. One of the areas that we see the biggest uptake is smart agriculture. One of the things is artificial intelligence is being put into a lot of the high-tech big equipment in the industrial agricultural system. And one of the big advantages of this has been allowing artificial intelligence to actually disseminate things like fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. You can do this more precisely, and this can reduce the total amount of pesticides or fertilizers or herbicides that you're using. It's good for the farmer in that it reduces the total cost of those inputs, but it's also good for the environment. Not necessarily replacing the industrial agriculture, or it isn't replacing the industrial agriculture system. But again, you can argue there's certainly some real potential benefits there. There's also lots of other applications of artificial intelligence. I don't have time to get into them, but just one example is there's some now free apps out there that are helping small farmers, that allow small farmers to do things that they weren't able to do before. Plantix is one small example. This allows farmers to take a photograph of a plant, and it can help them identify diseases, and this can more quickly help them to save a crop. And you can have these tailored, and a lot of times this is very beneficial for small farmers. So that gives you a kind of quick thumbnail sketch of some of the big possible benefits of artificial intelligence for sustainability. Let's now turn to what I see as the dangers for sustainability. And these, I have to say, have, for whatever reason, caught the imagination of the world a lot less than the advantages. If you were to go out and look at how people are talking about artificial intelligence and sustainability, you'll see the vast majority of articles are seeing this as a breakthrough towards trying to get us to sustainability, as people get caught up in the excitement of particularly nifty technologies that they see as doing things in new and creative ways. People writing about the dangers for sustainability, it's relatively few. And so one of the contributions of my book is to kind of get people to think a little bit harder about what this means as a technology as a whole, what this means as it becomes electricity and it's in all different aspects of the world. So the first kind of danger I see, and again, you can push back on this, maybe you don't totally agree with this, is I do actually worry that one of the things this does is the same as with deciding that big business can be our sustainability leaders, that voluntary corporate social responsibility is somehow more efficient and effective than state regulation. I worry that relying on technology and getting super excited about all the ways that technology can fix things and move us forward, that we get caught in a kind of techno-optimism that reinforces the same system that's been causing all of these problems. So the number of people who write about how artificial intelligence is revolutionizing industrial agriculture and making it more efficient and allowing us to grow more with less, etc. But it reinforces industrial agriculture. It ends up leaving farmers that purchase these machines or rent these machines highly dependent upon big technology companies and agricultural companies, and often end up reliant on the seeds and then the fertilizers that are recommended and the pesticides that are necessary for the machines. And so it all sounds good in isolation when you look at just one farm and what potentially you can do to reduce the inputs. But when you step back and think, what happens in terms of the campaign to try and promote small farming and try and advance different kinds of farming than industrial agriculture relying on the bare Monsanto conglomerates? Well, then you get a very different concern, right? So how do I first kind of worry here is that people are getting basically too excited by this technology, getting too excited by what this can do. A second one, this one won't surprise those of you following what's going on with artificial intelligence, is there's lots of concerns here around data privacy And in particular, I'm actually less concerned for me personally about the ability of Facebook and Google and Tencent and Alibaba to access all of our personal data. But I am deeply concerned about how the extraordinary expansion of facial recognition cameras and the dramatic increase in surveillance in the internet and all the different ways machine learning is empowering these surveillance devices, how that's actually affecting the ability of activists to protest, of environmentalists to actually be critical, and that we're seeing a very quick deepening of surveillance, and that, if anything, companies are most excited, and especially governments are most excited about the ability of this technology to give them more control and power, to actually let them see into our lives more. Yes, to some extent about our data, but also just to recognize our faces. And so, when you go into a country like China and you have facial recognition cameras that can find you in a big city in 8 minutes, it becomes a very, very different world, especially if you're trying to be an environmental activist and you're trying to be very critical. A third danger I see here is, most of the excitement has been around machine learning and the ability of machines to learn from big data. But if data is biased, if data is flawed, the machine will learn in biased and flawed ways. These are intelligent only in the sense that they've been able to find correlations and make predictions off of data. And so frequently these machines can actually act in scary ways and can have gender biases, can have racial biases if the data has gender biases and the data has racial biases. And so people love the idea that artificial intelligence is somehow intelligent, but in fact, it's not nearly as clear as that. And there's many examples, everything from trying to create hiring tools that discriminate against women to trying to create sentencing tools that discriminate against Black Americans. And I could go on and on. There's lots of examples where bias is a serious problem here. The other two things that I think are very interesting in terms of the conversation we're going to have about big business is these are very powerful technologies in the sense that they often make better predictions, and they will often give very accurate advice for, let's say, trying to save energy or trying to do something more efficiently. But at the same time, they have very low transparency, and in many cases with machine learning, with these machines that have learned from the data, we can't actually explain how they make their decisions. They use so many variables, and they're doing it in such a complicated way that nobody actually knows exactly how the machine knew or decided what it was going to recommend. This is something as simple as using these to decide who to give a microloan to, right? It might approve your loan, it might deny your loan. These microloans, and there's a very large number of these starting to proliferate around the world, where you can use your smartphone to request a microloan, and then the artificial intelligence makes the decision, and they're very, very good at predicting whether that money will be paid back or not. Much better than when humans were doing it. But it can't actually explain why it decided to give you the loan or why it decided not to give you the loan. And so this creates a whole other layer of opaqueness for the big companies that control this. And bizarrely, it's even opaque for the companies themselves, right? They can't see into it easily. Now they're working on this. People are trying to figure out a way to make this stuff more explainable. They're trying to add things like trust and work to develop trust. But this is definitely a very serious problem. A fourth very serious problem is this technology, partly because of just its power, has a real ability to create further injustices. Probably the one that it's leaping out the most is it's actually clearly channeling more power and money into the companies with the biggest resources today. The most powerful companies are benefiting the most. And so we're seeing a greater inequality in the corporate world as big companies become even bigger and more powerful as they consolidate and concentrate. But it's also having big implications on employment. And there's no question that we're seeing quite a dramatic shift in both what you see as repetitive tasks, but there's lots of tasks out there that this new machine learning, artificial intelligence can replace. So for example, legal assistance and trying to do fact checking and drafting contracts, and a lot of kind of work that involves repetitive intelligent tasks is what is replaced. Now what can't be replaced, actually interestingly, is actually harder things like changing a diaper or being a parent or being a student. That it can't do, but it can take away a lot of jobs. And so there's estimates out there. We're not exactly sure what's going on, but we're talking about a transformation in the workforce in places like China and the United States, but it'll diffuse to large portions of the world where large numbers of their workers are thrown out of work and been forced into retraining, and this will have very dramatic implications. And then finally, and here's one I find particularly interesting as a political scientist, is it's also very clear to me that the machine learning forms of artificial intelligence in particular, particularly the deep learning from big data, it favors states or organizations that can collect data and can do it in very powerful ways that can end up being basically better data. And so authoritarian systems actually have an advantage here because they don't have the same privacy concerns, but they also have much greater infiltration into people's work lives, into their credit lives, into their social media lives, into their even internet interaction lives. And so it's abundantly clear to people looking at this technology that the reason that China is competing so hard with the United States and in many ways is further ahead in terms of the implementation of machine learning is that they can just very aggressively collect data. And when you get good data, your machine learning is just better. And so one of the reasons they're so good with facial recognition technology, one of the reasons they've become so powerful at terms of iris scanning and license plate scanning and all of these technologies of surveillance is that they just simply have very powerful data. On the other side, we see it's very clear that this is a powerful technology for disseminating disinformation. And as we're in this kind of post-truth politics, and as nobody's really sure if any of our political leaders now are even remotely telling the truth, kind of trust around the world is declining. And increasingly, as artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, it's adding to that sense of who do we trust, right? And so one of the applications of artificial intelligence that's taking off this year is the ability to make fake videos and to have President Obama or past President Obama look exactly as if he's giving a current speech, and it's completely fake. And so people watch this and all of a sudden they're not sure what's real. And so you can have presidents and prime ministers out and people are going to look at that and go, oh, that's not really President Trump. That's just fake. So it's not just fake news, it's fake videos, it's fake images, right? And so this has been around in the pornography industry for a couple of years now, and they've been putting famous movie stars into pornographic filming, but it's now moving into the political sphere. And what's really starting to scare people is it won't be long before it's in the average person sphere, meaning that you and I, could decide we want to make a fake video of a friend of ours speaking, and you can see the bullying and the dangers and all the basically loss of trust that might come from something like that. So that gives you a first basket of kind of dangers. And I know it seems like such an exciting technology, and I don't want to put a damper on it. But there's other dangers here too. One of the ones that the book tracks very closely is this technology is also very clearly concentrating big business control. And so one of the arguments I made with will big business destroy our planet? And those of you who've read the book know my answer is no, not completely. And my big worry with big business is they're focused on profit making, on growth, on expansion, and control, right? They want to, in a world where most things are organized around global supply chains, they want to control those global supply chains. They want to control the inputs that are coming in, the quality of those inputs, but also the price of those inputs. And artificial intelligence is a very powerful technology adding to the control of these big companies. And so we're seeing yet another leveraging point for these companies. Just, one example is the right to repair for farmers, right? How can a farmer possibly repair artificial intelligence that starts to go awry, right? And this ends up creating more dependency of more people on these companies, giving them more control deep into their supply chains. At the big scale level as well, I also see this technology is very much empowering militarized states. So I talked about it empowering authoritarian states like China. I should have said at the time that China is also exporting a dramatic amount of this surveillance technology and facial recognition technology, which is AI powered, in case you didn't know that, to other authoritarian countries in the developing world, right? So they've got a vast now export system trying to help other authoritarian states also monitor and control. But this is also a very powerful technology for the United States, and we see a very quick move to use more not fully autonomous military equipment, but semi-autonomous. So drones that do everything, right, but make the actual killing decision, right? We're seeing Russia moving in this direction as well. Lots of semi-autonomous or highly autonomous is what you might think about. Again, reserving the final decision on whether to kill or not, usually to, or leaving it to a military personnel. The same with China. And so we're seeing now an arms race starting to happen between China, Russia, and the United States as they all start to compete for highly autonomous weaponry. What's worrying about that is it's one small step to deciding fully autonomous is the future, meaning that the machines themselves will be making the killing decisions, and that we'll have lethal autonomous machines that are fighting each other but also targeting individuals. Not to give you a horrifying example, but one possibility would be a small bird-sized drone that has uploaded the face of a dissident or an activist that the government wants eliminated. That bird-like drone is sent out and it assassinates the person, right? And it does it once they find the person. No human at the control, right? And that technology is not far off. Now, there's lots of people fighting this, trying to block it in the sense of, can we have an international agreement and not allow this? But what's worrying right now is there's an arms race on the highly autonomous end. A third kind of big overarching danger here is we're seeing this technology also used to accelerate extraction, meaning that this is, yes, very good at advancing conservation. It's good at trying to help us monitor and understand the natural world better, but it's also, for example, very powerful at finding new, let's say, natural gas reserves or finding new oil reserves. So one of the big controversies in the US right now is Amazon has been marketing machine learning technology specifically for oil companies to try and help them get through this crisis of all this pressure from climate activists to say, we can get your costs down, we can find you new, cheaper reserves, we can find you cheaper and faster ways to extract natural gas and oil. And so we see this in the mining industry, we see it in the oil industry, and we see this in other natural resource industries. So at one end, it's promoting conservation, but at the other end, it's promoting the same kind of production, extraction incentives that become so common. A fourth one is consumerism. One of the things about this technology is, yes, it's very good at recommending Netflix to us. It's very good when we go to Amazon.com on suggesting products to us. But it's also a very powerful marketing tool. And so one of the fastest places that companies have started to use this technology is targeted advertising and using the data that they're collecting to specifically target and then rewrite the advertising for specific targeted groups and trying to find ways to encourage people to consume more. So I mentioned before that McDonald's has just been investing in buying up and acquiring these AI startups, and people think, why would a fast food company be doing that? Well, they're trying to use the machine learning to automate their drive-thrus so that as people are driving through, they can encourage them through personalized suggestions to buy more food. And it's working. They've actually kind of promoted this, not because they were dealing with sustainability, but they were trying to get investors to have confidence in their company. So they're like, see, we're managing to get people to eat more. This is a good thing. Now, on the sustainability side, they're not going to write that in their CSR report, but on their other side, they are. So we're seeing some very big things that we see in Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet happen, right? More big business control, more extraction, more consumerism. But we're also seeing just simply more shadows of producing and disposing of all of these artificial intelligence products that are out there, right? The smart refrigerators that are saving energy, the smart thermostats that are heating and cooling homes more efficiently, right? All of the smart appliances and the what people call the Internet of Things, all of these products that are talking to each other. Well, they require things like coltan and cobalt and rare earth elements. And so we're seeing a spike in mining around the world, often in places with dramatically poor human rights records, places like the Congo. And we're seeing, a need for these resources. We're also seeing yet more e-waste happening, right? And so it's adding more e-waste as people quickly dispose of these. And again, back to Will Big Business Destroy Our Planet, one of the very, very clear things about this technology is these companies are also trying their best to make these go as obsolete as quickly as possible, to get us to upgrade, to buy new products. But in fairness to the companies, the research on AI is also moving so quickly that it makes sense to upgrade and replace and get the better, newer technology. And so one of the things is we're kind of getting a double ramping up effect. It's partly planned obsolescence, but it's mostly just the knowledge advances are happening so fast that a smart refrigerator made 5 years ago isn't nearly as good as one made today. And so people are upgrading, and we're getting this massive e-waste problem worldwide. And then finally, one of the things is that I always keep in mind when I think about the shadows of consumption, and I presented that book, The Shadows of Consumption, here, as Letitia mentioned, was my first visit to Mexico. And I've never really felt like we've tackled these shadows of consumption. They still remain one of the biggest problems in my mind. And so one of the examples I've been working on recently, and it relates to artificial intelligence, in that almost all these products use a huge amount of plastics. And if you look at plastics as a whole, right, just that alone, right, from 2006 to 2019, we produced more plastics in the world than all of history before this time, right? You just, wow. And then if you look at what that's meaning for the world, well, plastics going into the ocean set to double from 2010 to 2025. And one of the things that we often hear in the AI world, and it's true, that autonomous vehicles are going to dramatically reduce the amount of automobile deaths around the world, which sit at about 1.3 million every year. Autonomous vehicles are predicted to cut the number of deaths by 90%, right? So a lot of people say that's a big sustainability breakthrough. We don't want to have all these horrible injuries and automobile deaths. That's definitely good. But then if you think, but we need to replace all the cars. We need to get rid of our conventional cars and then get autonomous cars. And then if you look at where's the plastic that's flowing into the ocean coming from, and then you see, wow, car tires comprise 5 to 10% of all the marine plastic pollution right now, right? And there's no talk about, gosh, we may need less cars on the road because we can't have so many vehicles with so many car tires. Oh, and if you're wondering how car tires are plastic, about half of the vehicle car tires now are made from synthetic rubber, not natural rubber, right? So synthetic rubber is a form of plastics, right? So, all right. So very quickly, what are some of my big conclusions in the book? Well, I hope I made it clear in this discussion, right, that as I see it, this is an extraordinarily powerful technology, artificial intelligence, and it's going to transform my field of global environmental politics over the next few decades. I don't see any way around this. If you saw all the different components and you think about what electricity did to the world, I think that even though it's technically hard and sometimes computer scientists write in ways that are not easy to understand, I do think sustainability people like all of us, we have to engage with this technology. It's big. The pace is fast, it's furious, it's accelerating. It is hard to generalize, right? There's lots of goods coming from it, lots of not good things. But overall, my argument is it's tending to empower big business and it's tending to fuel capitalism. That's kind of the takeaway for me. And I also feel like we can't just wish it away, right? It's too diffuse and it's too everywhere, right? That's not going to be possible. And there's too many, powerful interests that have been unleashed. There's too much money at stake. There's too many big companies. It's not going away. I would even say we wouldn't want it to go away, right? I mean, the dramatic value for environmental science, which a lot of you are studying, sustainability science, it's very clear that it's innovative, it's advancing things in very creative ways. It can be very valuable for things like efficiency. But the key point for me would be to recognize its limits, right? That it's a technology, and to kind of put the critical political economy hat on and think, we can't get too excited, we have to watch. And that we need to minimize the risks and we need to minimize the dangers. And even something as simple as needing an international agreement to forbid lethal autonomous weapons, right? We can't have weapons with the capacity to decide who and when and where to kill people, right? This is a slippery slope down to complete disaster. But there's many other areas that we need to put in very careful checks around bias and around prejudice and around injustice and so on and so forth. And so, as I see it, it's kind of vital to fight against this big business and militarized state that potentially could destroy the planet. And there's the book. Okay, thank you all very much. Wow. Pleasure.
Well, impressive and very, very worrisome